Welcome back, everybody. I'm Winter, and today I'm going to be bringing you a hardcore game analysis here. This is a Protoss versus Terran match that I played recently that I think really demonstrates a lot of the decision-making required as a Protoss and something as a Terran in order to win. I'm just going to be breaking it down bit by bit from my perspective and why I'm making certain decisions. I'm going to try to explain little tells and what's important at certain timings. I'm going to try to take it a little bit slow, so if you're a newer player, you can kind of follow along. And if you are a more experienced player, you can look for some more details as well. So it's going to be longer than the actual game time. Pretty medium-sized game. It ends up being around 13 minutes. I'm going to tell you right now, there's no massive cheeses, anything like that. It just comes down to a pretty intense macro game. So, already starting out, we're in Protoss versus Terran. This means my biggest threats as a Protoss player, my plan early on, I'm going to lay out my game plan. My game plan is to get a second base, get a little bit of scouting information, make sure he's not doing anything too intense early on that I need to be worried about. This would include proxy racks, factories, anything like that. So I'm going to be sending the probe scout out soon enough. And now something that a lot of newer players especially don't really think about is pylon placement. Where these pylons are located is incredibly important when it comes to surviving the early game and having an economy to match the Terran or exceed him later on. If your pylons, if you just have a pylon, for example, like right out here, anything like that, well, that's not really going to accomplish anything. Having this pylon here means it's a super pylon. Well, obviously, if you put your gateway there. A super pylon is a pylon in range of a warp gate or a nexus. It becomes a warp conduit is the technical one, but super pylon is what everybody uses. And allows you to warp in almost 3 times faster, which is very important defensively. So, my first pylon is going to end up here. This is going to cover this side. I'm going to have another pylon in this area to cover this side against drops, against Liberators, maybe even against the early Reaper. And then, eventually, Protosses want a pylon at the back of the mineral line, and this is to deal with drops and especially Liberators. Especially if you're going for a ground-based strategy, then you don't have a great counter to a Liberator that sieges up the back of your mineral line. The same thing can be said over here. You got a pylon over here, pylon near the front, so that way you have that same level of coverage, especially against Liberators and somewhat against medevac drops as well. So going into this, that's what I'm thinking about with my pylon placements. I'm adding on the gateway early on, going for a nexus first, especially on a map like Frozen Temple that has a very small rush distance, is incredibly greedy, and almost needlessly so, if that makes sense. Alright, I'm sending the probe scout out. And from here, I'm just building up probes. Usually I'll go down for my nexus around 18 supply, because this times out to where you can get a nexus, and then you can get your cyber core, and then have a unit produced by the time a Reaper comes across, so that way you can actually deflect the Reaper, which is very important. I've got a single gas on the way, because if I want to have all these things, I want to have a nexus, I want to have a cybernex core, I can't invest in more gases early on. I can't get more assimilators. Alright, so now this is an important part of the game. Scouting information. Getting this by sending the probe scout out before 1 minute. I see he has a barracks on the way. I can go to his gas geyser. I can click on it and see that there is 50 gas remaining. Which means he didn't go for a gas first. He didn't go for the really quick tech. Gas geysers start with 2,000, just for example here, 2,000. So you can click on a gas and see what you have access to. This means he can't get a factory immediately. This means it's very likely going to be a Reaper to start out, and then it's likely after that he's going to expand. Alright, I see no second gas. I see he's got an orbital on the way. All the makings of it, and now very importantly, I actually see he's producing out of this. You can actually see Terran buildings are producing by when they light up. I see he wants to go for the Expo with the SCV down there. So everything's shaping up to a relatively standard build. Not a reactor first, which would indicate he wants more Marines early and maybe hit a bit of a quicker push timing. He has an SCV scouted, so I gotta watch out for that. And I'm sending the probe off to the side because I'm gonna send it back in to get more information later on. Because the Reaper's gonna come across the map. Usually it'll show up in your base around 2:15 to 2:30, depending on if he goes to try to find your probe scout. But right now, I like to open up with a Stalker, and what I like to do is get an early Robo for a Warp Prism. This is a bit of a micro-intensive build. If you aren't really prepared to go for really heavy micro-intensive type of strategies, because it relies on the Warp Prism kind of keeping him at home, if that makes sense. And you see the robo there. I come back in, and I see actually a Marine first. So this is important, because I expected him to have a Reaper, right? I expected him to have a Reaper. He didn't have that Reaper. He had a Marine first, a single Marine, which means that's what he was producing at the start. And that means he's probably making a factory either out on the map or in his base a little bit quicker than I expected. So this throws me off a little bit. So I'm going to scout around my base in order to look in case he's building a factory out there. I mean, it's not 100% that it's going to be outside my base, but there's a chance he's getting a factory earlier than I expected. Maybe he somehow got it in my main, he snuck it in. But now this is just being diligent. Checking your corners isn't limited to FPS games. You got to check your corners in StarCraft especially as well. So I'm continuing to build here. I'm going to want to get my mothership core in a timely manner. I'm just checking all around. Because there's no real risk at this point. I can't really go across the map with one stalker. That's not going to be able to put any pressure on. But I also don't need to defend anything, right? There's not going to be any unit. Like, what is it? Is he going to walk across with 3 Marines? No, he's not going to do that, because that would be silly. So just having the stalker going around looking for buildings is not really costing me anything. And if I do find a factory or a starport or something like that, that's a huge amount of information to work with. So now just picking up the mothership core, I've got my tech on the way. As Protoss, you have to be really decisive about your first tech choice. This is important because you have effectively one tool to deal with whatever Terran is doing early on. And if you don't use that tool well, like gateway units aren't great against liberators or drops. If you're going to go for blink, you need to have the stalker commitment. So you need to invest in that tech, and you need to know why you're getting that tech. You don't just get a robo because, I guess, observers are pretty good. You get a robo because I want to have an observer out, so that way I can have defenses against early medevac drops. And then I want to have a warp prism in order to keep them at home. The warp prism is, now remember those pylon placements I'm talking about and everything like that. I'm not going over the build order. This is not a build order guide. This is more of a talking about my decisions, by the way. If you'd like, I will try to find the replay and provide it in the description. If I don't do it right off the bat, remind me in the comments. But this isn't a perfect execution of a build, but it's more thinking about certain things here. So, I go in and I see, alright, he's got his second base up. It looks like he might not go for an early attack. I'm still worried about, the reason I had my units set up like this is because a Widow Mine drop or some sort of early air harass is the biggest threat. So I had my mothership core with an observer in the main base. The idea here is if he comes in with a Widow Mine drop, I can overcharge, and before the Widow Mines burrow, or even if they burrow, I can use that photon overcharge to take them out. On the other side, I have my stalkers right at the edge with the objective to gun down the medevac before any sort of drop can come in, or take out a liberator before it can siege up on a mineral line. So I see this push. This is kind of a weird timing. I was caught off guard here. I didn't expect there to be just a medevac early on, so I'm doing a little bit of micro. You notice here, making a little bit of a mistake with my minerals. I'm not building probes. I got caught a little bit off guard, so I slipped a bit when it comes to dealing with this in general. And the follow-up tech is the Twilight Council. Off of a robo, Twilight Council 90% of the time is your best option. Transitioning into a Stargate or directly into things like a Robo Bay for Disruptors or Colossi are not going to be great for filling out an army that can defend a third base, because you're just not going to have enough effective units on the ground to defend. Immortal's not reliable because of how slow they are, and they can't deal with Liberators. And now I can be out on the map because, one, I've already seen his Cyclone. Now, you'll notice that Pylon comes into use. But I've already seen his Cyclone, and I've seen he's gone for a medevac. So this means he went for more of a 1-1-1 play. 1-1-1, where you have the factory, the barracks, the factory, and the starport before adding on any real bio production, any barracks production. Yeah, I'm just scouting in right now. And that reactor on the factory is much more likely, I'm thinking, to be for medevacs to go switch over to a starport, as opposed to actually making reactor Widow Mines or anything like that. So right now I'm thinking, okay, where are we now? Sure, we've had a little bit of a weird, a slightly weird start. Usually you'll see like a Widow Mine drop, or maybe a light Cyclone push, or something like that. But effectively we're at the position that I mostly wanted to be, which is I've got a third base on the way. I've gotten a decent chunk of probes. We're looking at 46 right now, but I've got a third base finishing up. I could have been better on probe production, which is why my supply is a bit low. I've got my pylon set up for defense here. I've got a forge on the way. We've already started the blink, and I'm still okay with the blink because I know he's not going to have his bio. And blink is really important to get early because later on, you don't want to be waiting for blink. Blink is the upgrade you usually see first. This is a mistake, by the way. 2 out of 3 in gas. I think that was most of the game. If any of you noticed that. But blink is something you get first, because stalkers are not really your frontline unit. But early on, you don't need frontline units. You don't need a bunch of adepts or zealots or anything in front. The stalkers are more of a sniper unit. They're a support unit that stand behind things. They can be a core part of your army. You can have a lot of stalkers, but you're going to need something else combined with them over time. But early on, you can fight with the stalkers. The lower numbers of units there are, the better stalkers are, because they're good, they're quick, they can kite units effectively, they can stutter step to maximize their damage, they outrange marines, they can snipe off liberators and medevacs. So that's why going for the blink first, and then transitioning into the glaives, which is probably going to be my choice, to increase the damage output of those adepts, or going for the charge come afterwards, because those units aren't great in low numbers. Like, having 4 adepts is not going to be nearly as useful against early harass as having 4 stalkers, whereas later on, having 4 adepts is going to be more useful on the ground than having 4 more stalkers, if that makes sense. It's about what's useful at what time in the game, and early on, blink is very cost-effective, and later on, you want to have those mass units like adepts be stronger. Alright, so my game plan from here is making sure, trying to get a beat on his third base timing, getting splash damage to deal with his army, and I usually prefer either the disruptors. Every once in a while, I'll go for colossi. If I see, if I snipe off a couple medevacs, it's more reliable to go for colossi. I know colossi not as popular in Legacy, but you see a decent usage for them in Protoss versus Terran, because it kind of forces anti-air, whether it's Vikings or Liberators, out of Terran, and they can't just use those incredibly cost-effective bio units. Disruptors can be effective against bio, but if you airball your shots, and you don't hit any of those units on the ground, the disruptors get literally 0 value, and they add nothing to your army, which is why having Colossi can be a good backbone in the right situation. I believe this game I choose to go disruptors because I'm pretty comfortable with my control, and I'm able to get a decent economy, so I don't have to 100% rely on disruptor hits. But Colossi are not useless. Let's put it that way. So right now, I'm getting my third base up. I still keep that War Prism out on the map. This Liberator's being annoying, but the fact he made a Liberator is also important. That means he's not going to have medevacs quite as quick because he was using it for this Liberator tech. So I'm just kind of looking around. The Liberator unseated, I'm trying to snipe it off over here. I should be keeping the War Prism on the other side of the map. There's no reason for it to go home right now, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm just trying to find this Liberator. Didn't end up working out. Alright, and I'm setting up pylons at my third base, and on your additional bases, pylons are still very important. This is to fend off any direct pushes. Now, this is the scary part of the game. This is very scary as a Protoss player, because right now I'm in the dark. I'm blind. And the night is dark and full of terrors. I see he's coming up the front. Now, notice I sent out a probe there. As soon as I consolidated my forces on my side of the map, I need to kind of reach feelers out. I need to have vision around. And so I sent a probe up the middle to die, because I suspected he might have an attack coming from that way. And I have no pylons at the front, and my units are slightly out of position. So, that is why I sent that probe out, and we find that he has this army. The only way I'm fighting this force, by the way, is on the high ground here, if that makes sense. And I really should have had a couple pylons up here, because right now I have no splash damage. So I have no way to take out a big chunk of this army at once. And if he just stims, then even with good blink micro, it's still not great here. This is why you want a pylon or two on the high ground. This is actually a bit of a mistake by me to try to fight in this location. As you can see, he honestly probably could have fought a little bit harder. And sniping off that one medevac is really nice for me, because that means it takes a bit of the strength out of a follow-up push. But now I'm a bit scared. Now I'm saying, okay, we need to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm getting a pylon at the front. I've got my Robo Bay on the way. I'm getting an Immortal. We've got Glaive to Depths. I've lost a big chunk of my Stalkers, which hurts. It hurts a lot. Because those Stalkers, you don't want to be making Stalkers anymore. You want to be done with Stalkers at this point. You have your 12, 15 Stalkers, which can one-shot Liberators and Medivacs, and then now you're focusing on splash damage, stuff like that. But in this situation, you see Liberators or Medivacs, and just in general, you're going to want to have a few more Stalkers. So I'm not very happy with that trade. Now, this is the most important thing. This is the part of the game that I wanted to most show you guys, and I think is the most important. Because it's not about how to engage a Terran. It's not about what army composition I'm making necessarily. It's about how to get vision and how to use that vision. So there are several things happening for me right now. I'm in the dark, mostly. I know he's gone for a bio-based force. I know it's probably going to end up being Liberators eventually. But now what is the strength of a player with a lot of Medivacs eventually transitioning to Liberators? It's positioning. Being in the right place at the right time with Liberators sieged up means you'll be in a great spot as a Terran. So what am I doing? I've got a probe just chilling out here because I don't have enough observers because I'm really desperate to make robo units. I've got my Warp Prism on this side. This Warp Prism is used as a counterattack option because the best way to pull them out of position is a nice Adept Warp in at the right time. I'm going to be going... This observer is moving out a little bit further so I can see if there are any drops or attacks on this side. I'm sending a probe out to get pylons to see if there are any big medevac drops. So I'm covering quite literally all my angles, or I'm doing my best to cover all the angles, especially the most obvious ones, an attack on this side, a drop on this side, and an attack via this angle. So if I have that preemptive positioning, I can move my Disruptors, I can move my Mothership Core, I can move my Blink Stalkers, I can snipe off units, I can set up cannons, I can get Warpins all ready before a drop comes in or Liberator siege up. Knowledge is power, and that's the most important part of Protoss versus Terran at this stage, is knowing where his army is and being ready for it before it gets there. If you are reacting to a Terran, you are losing, because their units are incredibly cost-effective if they're in the right place. But yeah, you see, I'm getting a lot more vision. Pretend like you want to pretend like you have Overlords, even if you don't have Overlords, no matter what race you're playing. So you see that here. I'm getting upgrades. Upgrades are important, but at this point in the game, it really does come down to positioning and being in the right place at the right time. I'm getting, you see the pylons on the right-hand side. I see this attack coming in, and I see it a bit late. Like, I'm not quite in position here because my observer wasn't out quite far enough. I finally finished the Disruptor, but I have enough Adepts here, I feel, to kind of hold up. Also got that Disruptor on the side. I'm a bit scared of the Widow Mines. Not a great Disruptor hit either, and that's why Disruptors can kind of be misleading. Like, you'll be like, I have 3 Disruptors, then you shoot out 3 shots, they do nothing. Now, I just drew a Widow Mine hit in, because I knew we had a couple in there, so I just right-clicked a few Adepts forward to soak the Widow Mine hit and do some friendly fire damage onto those medevacs. And that's going to be enough to turn the tides here, even without the good Disruptor hits, and it'll help me pick off a couple medevacs. So a little micro trick there. But I'm still a little bit behind in supply. So after that fight, what am I thinking? I just killed a couple medevacs. I've revealed Disruptor Tech. So as soon as you reveal Disruptor Tech, he knows a new challenger is approaching. So, he's going to be going Liberators. He might not have done it yet. You see in the production tab, he just started ship weapons. I guarantee you, those aren't to upgrade the weapons on his medevacs. So, he's going to be transitioning into Liberators. I already know that. I've got my Disruptor production, but at this point, I'm realizing, okay, he's probably not going to be as aggressive for a little while. He might try to do drops, because at this point, you can't really fight that well into Disruptors. If you have godlike micro, which a lot of Terrans like to pretend they do, but let's be honest, they don't, then maybe you can fight in, but more you're trying to pull a Protoss out of position and limit their economy. So right now, I want a 4th base. I want a 4th base, and I want to do whatever I can to make sure his army cannot be sieged up in the right place at the right time. 4th base on the way. And I've got my, you notice my observer moving forward. I'm projecting myself a little bit further onto the map because I have more space to control. So I need to have vision out further. And I need to have more prep time because obviously we have larger territory now. But I've got good vision, as you see on the right-hand side. I actually spot a triple medevac drop with those pylons because at this point in the game, he wants to do... Yeah, alright. I just caught a glimpse of an attack moving by as well. So where are we right now? What is the current situation? This is the most dangerous part in the game. This is when, if you're using the Select All Army hotkey, you're just A-moving your entire army across the map. This is when you will lose, especially at this level. So I need to decide, how do I split up my army to deal with this? He doesn't know he's been spotted, so let's think about vision. He doesn't know he's been spotted on the left-hand side. He knows he's been spotted on the right. He killed the pylon. He knows I saw that. But an observer only spotted the edge of the army on the left-hand side. Well, he's got a scan here. This is a smart move. He's going to see my army moving into position. So, a couple double mind games here. One, I know he doesn't have a fourth base. So if he doesn't have a fourth base, he's pretty committed to getting damage done. He's not going to pull back with this attack easily. Two, I know he's seen my army. So that means he'll think most of the army is moving out of position, and he's going to be less focused on the attack on the left side and more focused on an attack on the right. So I need to split my army in a way that's going to be effective. So what I end up doing here is I end up splitting disruptors on the right, because he's probably not going to be paying as much attention to that, because he's expecting it to get damage done because there's no units there. So having the disruptors on the right means I can fire off disruptor shots against an army that's probably not paying attention, whereas I take the bulk of my army and I move it to the left where he's going to be focusing his attention, because I need to crush that as well at the same time. So let's see how it goes. I split off a few units because you can't just have disruptors, because even if like 2 marauders live, they will kill all yours. At the same time, I'm warping in because I want to do damage simultaneously. Yeah, going forward over here. We've got the attack on the right-hand side, flipping out a couple disruptor hits. He's not really paying attention. I've got to crush this army at the same time. He actually cleans up a couple disruptors, but I forced the army back. And I didn't split this that well. It didn't go how I wanted it to go. But I've got the adept warping. I've got the counter stab at the same time. And I'm able to kill some of these workers. And I'm doing my best now. He's now on the defensive. I'm not able to warp it on that side because that's not a super pylon. I can't rely on that. But he's now playing on the defensive. So as long as he's doing that, I have the initiative. I've deflected. I lost a couple disruptors. I lost some of my army. But I didn't lose my fourth base. And I didn't lose my warp prism. And now I've put him on the back foot. And now this is very important. He's taken a step forward, but now he has to take 2 steps back. Because we have multiple tools to move forward. I've killed a couple medevacs. I've taken out a decent chunk of bio, which means if he decides to use his drops aggressively, he just won't have enough at home, so he should be staying at home. So I need to try to figure out where is that army, and what is it doing, and how many liberators and how much bio does he have in certain locations. That's a smart scan by him. He has good game sense as well, you can tell, by the way he's scanning and moving his units. At this point, I've seen 3 medevacs there. So that gives me a tell, a pretty big tell, on where most of his army is going to be. Now, I noticed right here, I've been able to get adepts into that left-hand side. So this either means, 1, his army's out of position, and it's moving back to deal with the adepts, or 2, I can jockey for position at the front, and the adepts will continue doing damage. Because right now, his worker count is dropping. So as long as I keep doing this, I'm going to keep getting hits in, and eventually he's going to get knocked out. I'm shooting off disruptor hits here. They're almost scouting disruptor hits, and I'm trying to ward them away as I do this. As you notice, the army keeps moving back a little bit each time. I actually snipe off a couple starports where he wanted to make liberators as well, which is really nice. And, okay. Now that we've done this, like I've done this much damage, his army has to be moving into position. I'm getting another adept warping. But at this point, I've already done a lot of damage. It comes down to having that vision. I almost got a nice hit there, but it comes down to having enough vision in the right spot at the right time. Now remember, guys, after you shoot off the disruptor shot, you can select it very quickly to try to get a better hit. A lot of players don't actually realize that, newer players, and that's how I'm able to get some of these nice disruptor hits. But the important things were getting vision against the multi-pronged attack, understanding that a player on less bases who scouted disruptor tech is going to do his best to pull me apart. So I need to have 2 different armies in 2 different locations, because medevacs are incredibly effective in small numbers. Like 2-3 medevacs can kill 24 stalkers, no problem. So having those disruptors split and having vision is important. Knowledge is power. It doesn't matter. I could have been going for Mass Void right here. It wouldn't have been as effective, but if I have enough vision, I can split my army correctly, then you're still in a good spot, especially against Terran. I think this is a matchup that a lot of Protoss players struggle with because of how easy it is for a Terran player to just come in with 2-3 medevacs or a Liberator and really ruin your day. So hopefully this was mildly helpful. At this point, yeah, he's going to clean up this army, but we've got to ask that professional question, at what cost? Because he's dropped down to 31 workers. He's lost a couple starports. This army actually isn't trading that well. And he's still got adepts running around his base, and he knows I have a 4. So from here, yeah, he can clean all this up. He has plenty of medevacs, but he knows what the supplies are looking like right now. And he's going to tap out. Yeah, once again, just having that vision around the map, kind of understanding that a player who's scouted disruptors is no longer going to attack directly, at least most of the time, and kind of hitting him before he's able to get that Liberator count up is very important. Now, the Warp Prism is the real key to kind of unlock the Terran. Having that Warp Prism in the right place with a Warp in at the right time, for example, after he's done a double-pronged attack, doing a Warp in will pull him out of position because his units are just either they've been destroyed in the attack, or they're out of position because they're still on the other side of the map. So a warp in will force what units he does have at home out of position, so that way you can attack in. But yeah, this was just kind of a demonstration of getting vision. Hopefully, I was able to explain it pretty well. Of course, leave me feedback, criticism in the comments. I'm not a perfect player. I tried to play my best here. This is a matchup I've actually been struggling. I've been getting better lately. I've been taking cues. If you want to watch a pro player, then I would say, well, Neeb is actually pretty good in PvT to watch. I would say players like Zest, even though he hasn't been doing that well lately. Just watch any Protoss player against Not Beyond in GSL a lot of the time. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this just for YouTube game analysis. But yeah, make sure, well yeah. Anyways, see you guys later. Good luck, have fun. Happy StarCrafting.